going to talk about mindfulness in chaos. Now, as an introduction, there's a story I'd like to share with you. My daughter is 3 years old at the moment, and she's got a really amazing imagination. And at least once or twice a week, she wakes up in the middle of the night and she comes and calls me and she says, "Daddy, there's a dragon in my tent." So we've got this little tent in her room, and this tent, she sees it as a castle, you know. So it's like I said, she's got an amazing imagination. And she wakes me up and she says, "Dad, you need to come and take the dragon out of my tent." So then I have to pretend to walk into this tent, and I have to pretend to fight the dragon and then throw it out the window. And the one day I made the mistake of saying, "I'm also throwing a unicorn out the window." And she said, no, unicorns are really kind. You don't throw unicorns out the window. And so for her, that's a solution. That's a solution. For her is the fact that Dad has fought the dragon, he's thrown it out the window. For her, that's amazing. I think for us as healthcare professionals, we're wide awake in the midst of this chaos, and we don't really have anybody walking in and fighting the dragon. In fact, the thing that I'd like to acknowledge as we start is the fact that we are in fact on the front line of fighting this virus. We are on the front line of people being very anxious. We are on the front line. If you're here today and you're a specialist, you work in casualties, you work in a hospital, you risk your life every single day going in there to help people. We are the people at the front line of this challenge. And I think that's why this group is so important. And as we go along today, you'll also start to see this group, I think, is going to be not this group only. We're collaborating with SISA and UTASA and SASOP, and we're trying to really get as many people together as possible to be able to say we're collaborating. We're going broader than just our own group, but this is one space that you can come to. And we are wide awake in the midst of the chaos. And the question is, how do we respond to the real danger and emotional stress as healthcare professionals? Because we can't fight it. I mean, we know that from an evolutionary perspective, we've got 3 predominant responses to stress and trauma. You know, so there's obviously nuances, but you know, underneath all of those. But the first thing is we fight. And the difficulty is we don't have a lion we can fight. We don't have a bear we can fight. We're not faced with something tangible that we can fight. We're fighting an invisible virus, and we can't really flee, because fleeing is literally not an option. You can't even walk your dog. How on earth? And I think that's where the topic for the series also comes along. When running is not an option. Running is literally not an option if you're outside. But as healthcare professionals, we're on the front line. We can run, but I think for most of us, it's not an option. We have to engage with this. And finally, we have a freeze response. And I think that's where a lot of our clients and patients are, is they're frozen. They don't actually know what to do. So not running 101. Now, the British Psychological Society has actually brought something out. They had an amazing webinar yesterday where they actually spoke to healthcare professionals, and they spoke to specifically dealing with the psychological health of healthcare professionals. Now, they say that this virus, based on what's happened in China, what's based on what's happened in Italy as well, they say that as a psychological fraternity responding to this, or just in terms of the psychological health from every single angle, from every single discipline, they say there are 3 key phases in responding psychologically to this. The first one is the preparation phase, and I believe that's where we are in South Africa at the moment, where we're setting up more resources, more beds. But in terms of the psychological support of healthcare professionals, I think we're also in the preparation phase, where we've got different people mobilizing different resources. And this is an anticipatory anxiety. We're planning may happen at a high level in a rapid time frame, leading to anticipatory anxiety about the unknown. And I think a lot of us are there. With limited time to plan and limited input into the preparation phase, many staff may not report feeling prepared for the outbreak. Many UK health trusts have now passed through this phase. I believe that's where we are at the moment. We're busy planning. We're busy trying to get things together. Because by the time we reach the active phase, which obviously all of us are hoping we don't, we're planning for the worst, but we're hoping for the best. We're hoping we don't get there. And that's where heroics and surge to solution. That's where people stand up and say, I want to do something. I want to help. So if you're here today to learn and to say, I want to get new skills, that's amazing. And I think that those skills might, if we need them, I think those will be really crucial as we go into an active phase where people actually start getting sick in bigger numbers. And we hope that doesn't happen, but if it does, as a psychological community, but also as specialists attending this group, that's obviously something very important to take note of. Now, there's a paradox that I think us as healthcare professionals sit with. I call it the paradoxical dance. And what I'm going to share with you specifically is this paradoxical dance. I'm going to illustrate something on my iPad. Okay, so as healthcare professionals, we're quite accustomed to showing people and to help people to stay within the regulation zone. Okay, so there's a zone in the middle here where normal human emotion takes place. We know this. The difficulty, I think, us as healthcare professionals that we have is we underestimate the fact that if there's a trigger in someone's environment, we see that their emotions go up, and there's a level of anxiety, there's a level of, some people actually might get angry. So the emotions go up. And I think what we as healthcare professionals often miss is the fact that when a patient's emotions go up, ours might not necessarily go up to the same level, but they also go up. And I think what's happened in this specific case, as healthcare professionals, we also didn't get the manual how to actually deal with this. We didn't get the manual about how to deal with an international pandemic, which means we are also stretched in terms of our own coping resources. People aren't able to go to the gym. People aren't able to de-stress. They're not even able to go for that coffee that they might with a friend. They're not even able to engage in leisure activities. And I think that's why mindfulness becomes so important. For us as healthcare professionals to also say that, and the paradoxical dance here would be, is the fact that there's a study that I did in 2013. And the study was done among psychologists who experienced the suicide of a patient. And it was after they experienced suicide of a patient, what was their response? And I found a paradoxical response. I found people saying, in the session, I found them saying, I'm not anxious, but I could see them, they're visibly trembling. I could see that they say there were no signs that the person was going to do it, while saying all of the signs that were there. Thirdly, they said, I exhausted all avenues, while asking if there was another avenue they could have explored. And this just tells me about this paradox that we as clinicians, I heard one psychiatrist say during the week, us as healthcare professionals, we make the worst patients because we often don't acknowledge the own anxiety that we have. And I think that's why this group is just for you. It's if you're sitting here and you're saying, well, I want to do this for me. We're not going to discuss patients. This is not a multidisciplinary team meeting where we're now unpacking a patient's symptoms. It's you. You are on the couch for these sessions. And what I want to invite you into is to let go of this paradox that I have to be a person that somehow at the moment, I have to be the hero. At this moment, it's about you also saying, how can I acknowledge and how can I deal with my own anxiety around this issue? Now, DBT provides us a model for flattening the emotional curve. Now, some of you might be very well versed in DBT. Some of you have not heard about DBT, Dialectical Behaviour Therapy. So dialectical behavior therapy was initially developed for patients with borderline personality disorder. Now, a patient with borderline personality disorder, for those of you that have dealt with it and deal with it quite regularly, those are generally the patients who have difficulties with regulating emotions. In other words, it's patients that either go into really highs, but it's not an emotional high, like I'm feeling really good. It's a distressing high where they go outside of the regulation zone. They go outside of a zone where they feel like still in control of their emotions. Or, and generally when they're up there, they say and do things that they feel really sorry and they feel shame and guilt about later on. Or they go really low, and that's where patients become suicidal. I call that space the dungeon. And DBT, specifically dialectical behavior therapy, was developed for individuals with these really highs and really lows. Right now, we find that DBT is evidence-based for depression, for anxiety, for bipolar mood disorder, for a variety of Axis 1 and Axis 2 disorders using the DSM-4 language. But as for today, what I'd like to do is I'd like to explain DBT as a model for flattening the emotional curve and flattening your emotional curve as well. And what Linan actually says, she says there's 4 primary ways to respond to a serious problem in life. And by the way, I'm going to make these slides available as well if you want them. The resources that get shared here, you are welcome to use as well. The first one is to change how you feel about the problem. Now, this is a difficult one because right now we are confronted with quite a big challenge. So changing how you feel about the problem is kind of what we're looking at today. And that's the emotional regulation and mindfulness skills. The second way to deal with it is tolerate and accept it. And that's a topic for next week. We're going to look at accepting what we got, not what we wanted. Us wanting things to be different is not going to make it different. Our anxiety, and this is going to be elaborated on quite a bit next week, but our anxiety about the situation is not going to make the situation better. So we've got an opportunity to say, how do we accept this? How do we integrate this? Because the quicker we can move towards accepting the situation, it doesn't mean we approve of it. It doesn't maybe mean we want it. It just means that we've gotten to a point where we say we're no longer fighting it, and we're actually saying we're mobilizing our own resources and the resources around us. And then the third way of dealing with the problem is to figure out how to solve the problem. And that's what we're going to cover in week number 3. We're going to look at surviving the crisis. How do we actually solve this problem? And the last one that Linan actually says, and I think she kind of put this in tongue in cheek, it says the last option we have is to stay miserable or possibly even make it worse by using those skills. And so I think she kind of said that by tongue in cheek. But the point is, those are essentially, from a DBT perspective, 4 primary ways that we respond to a serious problem. Now, enter mindfulness. Now, the question that I'm sure most of you have read on mindfulness, and I'm sure most of you know that there's heaps of evidence that suggests that mindfulness is actually the foundation of a lot of the therapies that we find today being very effective. But the question I put in there is this carry floss. So if I'm going to engage in mindfulness exercises and there's a part of my brain that's going, oh, I'm just being silly right now, for what it's worth, and I can send you through all of this online as well if you want to, there's empirical evidence that it reduces rumination for therapists and for clients, stress reduction, improved working memory, and you can read the rest. So there's heaps of evidence that actually suggests that mindfulness is a very, very effective treatment. In fact, mindfulness is the core of all DBT. Now, what I'd like to do, we're going to take about 2 or 3 minutes, and I'd like you to actually do a mindfulness exercise with me. You might have done this before, but considering what we've just said, my hope is that this will be something that you can do now, but something that you can also use as a resource for yourself. Remember, you're on the couch at the moment. You're the one who's getting the assistance, but there's also, you can probably use this in therapy as well. I'd just like to also say that this is one of literally tens of hundreds of different mindfulness exercises, but I want to do this one today because I found it very effective in my own life, but also in those of my clients. So what I'd like you to do is, where you're sitting, I'd like you to find a nice comfortable space. I'd like you to sit preferably with both feet on the ground. And what I'd like you to do is, I'd like you to take a nice deep breath in and slowly out. I'd like you to do that 3 times. And then what I'd like you to do is, the next time you breathe in, I want you to breathe in, but I want you to hold, I want you to tense up your muscles. Try and tense it up from your head all the way to your feet as much as possible when you breathe in. When you breathe out, I want you to let go. I want you to literally let go of the tension, breathing in, breathing out. I'm going to give you a few seconds just to do that. Okay. Now, I'm obviously going through this exercise quite quickly because I don't really want to spend too much time on that. Once again, it's a resource for you. My recommendation is that during this time that you actually make time to do this. I mean, the science behind it, obviously the neuroscience behind it, the effect that it has on your stress levels and cortisol levels, it's not within the scope of today, but I really recommend that you take 10 minutes a day and spend doing something like this. We're going to just unpack, or not unpack, we're going to discover a few other exercises you can do a little bit later. Mindfulness is the foundation of all DBT skills. Now, being in control of mindfulness is being in control of your mind rather than letting your mind be in control of you. Example, the Matrix. Now, most of you, if you're a healthcare professional in this group, it means you probably have seen the movie that was released in the early 2000s called The Matrix. Now, there's one section where the guy gets shot at, and if you haven't seen the movie, you probably would have seen the video clip somewhere. A guy gets shot at, and what he does is he ducks underneath the different bullets coming his way. And I like explaining mindfulness in this way, specifically for clients that have difficulty with emotional regulation. And I think in our case, in this situation, it's about us also being aware. I think awareness is a very, very important word in mindfulness. Us being aware of our own emotions that come our way. And it's the ability to see it quicker, to recognize your thoughts and your emotions quicker, and be able to respond in a way that you actually help yourself regulate. You can contain yourself in a more effective way. And I think that's where mindfulness is the core. And in mindfulness then it brings you into full awareness, being aware of the present moment. Example, your thoughts, emotions, physical sensations without judgment and without trying to change it. Now, this is a very important concept because as clinicians, I think we've got, and on the one side, we've got the opportunity to say, can we be mindful in this situation? Because a mindless response might actually be more damaging to ourselves and to our clients in this moment. The second thing is about attentional control, staying focused on one thing at a time. And that's very important for us. I think we've got so much information, we've got so much data coming at us, we've got so much stimulus coming at us, that our ability to stay focused on one thing at a time, especially if we're going to go into an active phase, this is going to become a crucial skill. And the 3 states of mind that I want to just introduce very quickly, if you've done DBT for a while, you would have, or you've been introduced to DBT, you would have seen this, but I'm going to introduce it anyway for those of you that haven't seen it. Now, we've got reasonable mind, we've got wise mind, we've got emotion mind. Now, what I want to share with you today, and I actually want to draw this for you, is we've got 3 states of mind that I've mentioned here. So you've got wise mind, which is known as the middle part skills. We've got emotional mind. And we've got reasonable or rational mind. Now, if we look at an example, for example, from a series called Big Bang Theory, with reasonable mind, we find that someone like, for example, Sheldon, he's someone that generally functions in reasonable mind the whole time. Now, if we as individuals function in reasonable mind the whole time, we are literally going to get nothing done because we will be overthinking everything. If we go to the other side of the coin, because that's what dialectical behaviour therapy, dialectic means 2 sides of the same argument can be true at the same time. Emotional mind, if we go just into emotional mind, if I would go, for example, if I were to play golf and I just go and play in emotion mind, I probably wouldn't make it past the first hole because I would be playing a shot and then I would probably break my club and throw it in the water. I'd be just in emotion mind. And the idea is to say, how can we synthesize these 2 using mindfulness? How can we find a way sometime during the day to synthesize reasonable mind and emotional mind? Because the thing about DBT is it tries to actually synthesize these 2. Now, you might find yourself that you might be there at different stages. You might feel like I'm in I'm an emotion mind right now. Or you might feel like, okay, I'm just verging over there. I'm just going into emotion mind a little bit. I'm just going to make this a little bit larger. I hope that helps. Or you might be finding yourself in rational, reasonable mind, and you're just rational. The idea is that mindfulness helps you when you are there to be able to say, well, you know what, I'm just grounding myself in a way that I can move into wise mind. And the idea about wise mind is like I said, it synthesizes your rational, it synthesizes the intellectual with the emotional. In other words, I'm getting more emotions or I'm getting more rationality, depending on where you are. If you find yourself that you're just there, you're just in rational mind, just reasonable the whole time, it could be very important for you to do mindfulness in terms of getting in touch with your own emotions and your own thoughts, to have a wise mind response, and I think, quite frankly, to have a more human response. So those are the key elements of states of mind. Okay. And then core mindfulness skills that I'm going to go through quite briefly, because I think the more important part is I'd like to go through a bit of a theory, and then I'd like to hand over to the panel. What I'd like to ask you, as I'm finishing off this section, I'd like you to there's a Q&A section. You'll see if you're on your phone, it's at the top of your screen. If you're on your computer, it's the bottom of your screen. There's a little button that says Q&A. Our panelists are actually on the Q&A already. So what I'd like you to do for the next 3 or 4 minutes, I'm going to spend discussing the last part. I'd like you to start asking questions so the second part of today, when we do get the panel involved, that there's obviously a conversation that's flowing. Now, core mindfulness skills we've mentioned: wise mind, these states of mind. Are you able to get into the middle? And as these 3 weeks go along, we're obviously going to unpack that a bit more. The what skills, and that's often when I get the question, okay, but mindfulness, how do I, what is it that I actually need to do? So the what skills are observe, describe, participate. And observe is where whatever you're busy doing, you're actually engaging with being centered on one thing, but you're trying to integrate as many of your senses as possible. I find that the almost like the entry or the gateway to mindfulness is engaging with your senses. And that could be something like having a cup of coffee. It could be something, I'm drinking a cup of coffee really slowly. I love coffee. So for me, the different flavors coffee, every single morning, what I do is I choose a different flavor and I have that coffee, but I try it generally. My coffee is cold before I finished it because I try and get every single flavor in there. Another exercise that I sometimes give my patients to do, and this is something that I'm sure it's a bit of a judgment, but it's effective nonetheless. I ask them to find the ugliest plant in their garden, or if they don't have a garden, to find a space where there's a plant that they really go, well, why is this in there? And to go to it and actually find one of the leaves and say, let me really observe what is this all about? And without exception, once they start really observing, they start seeing textures, they start seeing something quite different. What happens to your brain is it actually allows it to center. I often describe it as, it's like if there's a stream of stress, mindfulness just interrupts that stream for a little while, so that your body and actually that psychologically and cognitively you take a break from this extreme stress. Observing then means using your internal and external, recognizing your internal and external experiences by setting things aside. And I think what happened a little bit earlier with the breathing and also the bed muscle relaxation, you might have experienced a little bit of that. And there might actually be a bit of resistance to you doing these exercises simply because these emotions come up. And then the ability to describe. I generally recommend having a piece of paper or your phone next to you while you're busy doing an exercise like this. Please put your phone on airplane mode. There's no phone calls, there's no WhatsApps, there's no emails coming through. But the idea is that you find a way to also describe what is it that I'm experiencing, and I can actually write that down. And lastly, participate. There's a little voice in the back of your mind that's probably going, oh, this is silly, why am I doing this? If not, that's fantastic. But if you're anything like me, the moment I start getting quiet, I start thinking, well, I should have fed the dog. What is that I need to do next week? So there's all sorts of things my mind immediately starts going towards. And participating then means staying in the moment without holding back, bringing yourself back into the in the moment. And I think then the three important house skills is non-judgmentally, staying focused, and to be effective. Find something that's effective to you. Traditional meditation methods aren't effective for everybody. There's so much research that's been done on meditation, the effectiveness of it, but I have found that for some patients it just doesn't work. A walk through the garden, or a time in nature, or a time like I do, having coffee, that is something that is very effective as well. So the idea is to say what works. Okay? And finally, for this week, mindfulness in chaos. I haven't gone towards the thing that I've heard like 1,000 times this week. Every single person that gives psychological advice say, get into your routine, make sure that you set new goals, etc. I've heard that so many times. I haven't gone there today because I'm kind of assuming that everybody that's on this group has probably read something like that, or found something that says, what are things that I can actually do during this time to maintain a routine, etc. What I'm going to go with very specifically today is for you to say, what can I do during this time? And I would say use seemingly tedious moments as a time to center yourself. For example, taking a mindful shower. I find this very effective. It's a daily activity that everybody does. Showering, bathing, a time of cleaning yourself, and using that time to feel the temperature of the water. If you're taking a shower, to hear the water running, to experience, to smell the soap, to feel the warmth, to feel the temperature on your body. Drinking coffee very slowly, like I said, take time to look at the color of the coffee, to really smell the coffee, to not just gulp it down, but to maybe keep it in your mouth a little bit longer. Try and feel, try and taste if there's a little bit, if you can taste different nuances, all the different textures to the taste. And then the second thing is take advantage of being forced to slow down. This is very important. I think for a lot of us, we're very frustrated by the fact that we can't practice optimally. Our patients are canceling. We're having to figure out, how does Zoom work? What is Zoom? What is Skype? Which platform can I use? It's a mess. I've got so many people asking me around Zoom and how it works. And I've done demos upon demos. And the thing is, we are forced to kind of slow down right now. And I would invite you to say, if we are in a preparation phase, we're going to need all the resources we can get, including our own emotional and physical resources. And that's kind of where we're gonna go next week as well, accepting what we got, not what we wanted.